I was born when Adam and Eve were kicked out of paradise. I crossed over to the new land along with the descendants of Adam and Eve. In this land, I was raised by the trials that befell their people. I comforted them, and at times I devastated them. One night, I met a man down by the tracks that gave me a name. From that night on, my name spread among the land, and I made many friends. On a lonely night path, I met a man. He and I grew to know each other well. My name is Blues. Tonight, I visit this closest friend of mine. The story we're talking about today is about a man who sold his soul. In fact, if the title of the manga, Me and the Devil Blues, sounds familiar, then that means you're probably familiar with the tale of Robert Johnson, the legendary blues singer. Now, this manga is of course a fictionalized version of his story, kind of akin of what Vagabond is to Musashi Miyamoto, and I think this is an incredibly well done manga, hence why the recommendation of today. I do have a bit of a challenge. If you can guess the author or what other manga this author has made before I reveal it, then I'll be incredibly impressed, because I had no idea until I was told. After reading the first chapter of this manga, I wanted to do a little bit of research on the real life of Robert Johnson, and thanks to Wendigoon, he saved me a ton of time in doing so. Robert Johnson was born around the 1920s in Mississippi, and it was around this time where blues was becoming a very prevalent style of music. However, Robert wasn't very good, and the story goes that after getting booed off stage, he had disappeared for a period of time, and when he came back, he was so good at the music that they essentially just chalked it up to him making a deal with the devil during the period of time that he was gone. And that's exactly what this manga follows, the myth of Robert Johnson, where he is essentially introduced along with his current situation and status, how he isn't very good at blues, and the current state with his wife Virginia and their unborn child. And one night he does end up getting booed off stage. He takes his guitar, and they try to tell him what blues is, what it means, what the music literally means, and this manga does a very great job of just really putting into words what blues is capable of doing, how it's meant to bring out the deepest emotion of pain and anguish, something that when you go to hear Robert Johnson's music is just incredibly felt, especially when you read the lyrics. Now, going a little bit into the real life aspect, Robert Johnson actually during that period of time in which he was gone, I think in real life it was about 3 years, in the manga they make it like 6 months, and during that period of time he was gone, those who were close to him actually said that he went to train and learn guitar playing in the cemeteries with another great blues player, and that's how he actually got good. However, Robert Johnson himself leaned into the myth very heavily in his own songs, which pretty much only added more gasoline to the fire, if you will. So at least here in American folklore, the idea of an artist selling their soul for great musical talent could be chalked up to this guy. Now, the manga does a really great job of doing this, because when he goes to the crossroads and quote-unquote unknowingly makes this deal, I think it's interesting because there's almost an interpretation you could take, although the story kind of cements his status further and further as the story goes on. When he makes the deal, he essentially has no idea that much time has passed. He says it's only been 2 to 3 days, when in reality it has been forever, and during that time his wife had died. Now, originally I thought it could possibly have been Robert Johnson himself maybe coping the fact that he left for this period of time with another blues player to learn how to play, therefore he called him the devil and blamed it on that, when in reality the story here does actually lead into the supernatural. As the story goes on, he ends up meeting a thief and gets kind of stuck with this thief and their adventures, and they end up killing the brother-in-law of the guy who runs this town nearby. And so these two end up getting stuck with each other, but throughout the time when Robert Johnson's playing the guitar, his 5 fingers on his hand actually end up turning into 10, playing into this thing that was said about Robert Johnson as to how it almost sounded like multiple people were playing the guitar at once. That's how good he was. How he could do different bass lines and strings all at once and play so fast, it would be impossible for one man to do so. And I think the manga really did take an action turn as soon as the thief character Clyde is introduced, because it almost turns into a bit of a Tarantino film, and that's just not because of the dialogue. Look, it's 1920s Mississippi. White boys back then weren't singing the praises of MF Doom, right? Grow up. It's part of the context of the time. And what left me incredibly stunned was how in such a short amount of time, the manga was able to really make me emotionally invested in Robert Johnson, who's frequently referred to as RJ, but even Clyde, a character who morally is not good at all, but you can feel his pain and sympathy when RJ starts playing playing the guitar and pulls out the emotions that Clyde has towards his girlfriend, who is no longer there with them. And seeing these two interact and the situation, the predicament they find themselves in, really made the story take on themes and topics that I was expecting for it to get into, but not so heavily, and in such a way that I thought was incredibly well done, as RJ ends up getting accused of the murder Clyde committed and is then thrown in jail. And again, this is 1920s Mississippi, and they're pretty much planning to lynch RJ. And while he's in this cell, beat up, hurt, broken, feeling betrayed by Clyde, he gets a visit by the quote-unquote devil, which is actually visually is akin to the blues player that was teaching RJ in the real-life story. But in the manga, he visits him, and RJ tries to cope with everything that's going on recently, and he's trying to rationalize it, and even moments from his childhood where as a kid he walked by a lynching and he saw how that had left him scarred, and he says something that white men are the devil, white men are evil. And the actual devil in the story brings up an interesting topic where he says, if it were white people that were slaves, do you think that their treatment would have been any kinder than yours is right now? But with that being said, the series still does a great job of making you feel the pain and the anger and the sentiments that RJ is going through, and how that would play into his music, therefore not being dismissive of the experiences that he had gone through and the situation at the time, but being brutally honest still about the nature of humanity. And I got into this just thinking I was going to read a cool story about the man who got really good at the guitar, but that's not what this series turned into at all. The first half is sort of like that, but everything else up to this point, because the series is sadly on hiatus, it has not been finished, has been just an action-packed thriller of RJ and Clyde trying to run away from this town, which are now chasing them both down. And again, I really loved how this series was able to present these characters that I was fully invested in a short time, a plot that ends up playing out that feels completely natural, an environment that had me incredibly immersed and was able to get me interested in a genre of music I have never listened to in my life. And the artwork is some of the best artwork I have ever seen. And so now it's time for me to reveal the other story that this author has made. This is brought to you by the author of Prison School. Now, if you thought this was the same author as Gantz, you wouldn't be wrong for that, in the sense that a lot of people that I showed this to and I asked them that question all thought it was Gantz as well. But no, this is the author of Prison School, and I've heard he wasn't too happy with the fact that Prison School is his most popular work, and I could see why, because this is not talked about enough, and it is absolutely amazing. The artwork is top-notch, the dialogue is top-notch, it gets you incredibly immersed, and again, being able to put into words and visuals music and what music can make you do and feel is just great. In 33 chapters, it was able to fully depict the pain and anguish of a man whose whole life seems to have been followed by misfortune, and the one thing he wants to be great at, his desires, the thing, the instrument that will allow him to essentially pull out that inner pain that's within, has cost him the most, in an ironic twist, as usually deals with the good old Stanley himself. But nonetheless, I would highly recommend this, and if you are new to the channel and you haven't subscribed, please do so, leave a like, and let me know your thoughts on this if you have read it down in the comment section below. And peace.
The despair of the